In the year 1823, in a small, fog-laden town nestled between rolling hills, something happened that people would whisper about for generations, a secret buried beneath soil that seemed ordinary, yet carried weight no one could imagine. The wind shifted through the skeletal branches, carrying with it a scent of damp earth and old wood, and the townsfolk felt a subtle unease, as if the land itself remembered what men had tried to hide. A farmer named Elias Hart walked past his fields at dawn, hands calloused and mind restless, and though the morning seemed ordinary, a shadow of dread clung to the furrows he tilled, a secret waiting for the right eyes. Even the river that wound through the valley seemed to murmur differently that morning, whispering under the surface, carrying hints of a past long sealed, and villagers felt it, though they did not understand, and never would, completely. The town of Millbrook lay framed by dense forests, their pines swaying like silent sentinels under the early spring breeze, while birds called nervously among budding branches, and the smell of wet soil hung heavy after recent rains. Elias Hart's farmhouse stood at the edge of a narrow ridge, timber weathered gray and roof sagging slightly, the windows fogged from the morning chill, and smoke from the hearth curling upward into the pale sky. He was a man in his late 40s, shoulders broad from years of toil, hair streaked with gray, and eyes that held a quiet vigilance, as if they had seen more than the village would ever know. His hands, though rough and scarred, moved with care over the plow, feeling the soil beneath the blades, as though each clod of earth whispered truths he preferred to keep buried. The villagers respected Elias but feared the silence he carried, the way he lingered at dusk along the ridge, staring toward the woods, speaking little, and tipping his hat only briefly to those he met. He had a family once, long ago, but only a faded photograph of a smiling wife and child remained inside a locked chest, hidden from prying eyes, the memory pressed between pages yellowed with age. Even the animals on his farm seemed to sense his unease, the cows pausing mid-step to gaze toward the forest, the horses stamping with restless hooves, as though the earth itself knew a story they could not tell. The seasons had been unkind that year, rains late and storms frequent, the sky often gray, and each evening brought a chill that seemed to settle not only in bones but in the marrow of those who labored. Elias's neighbors whispered of debts unpaid and secrets kept, but none dared question him directly, for his presence carried the weight of authority and a subtle air of something unspoken, a moral choice that lingered just beyond understanding. At night, he would walk the perimeter of his fields, lantern in hand, listening to the crackle of frost underfoot, pondering decisions long made, decisions that threatened to root themselves into eternity if unearthed. The forest beyond the ridge seemed almost alive, shadows moving with purpose, rustling leaves like cautious whispers, and Elias, alone with his thoughts, often wondered if what he had hidden might one day seek him out. Despite the simplicity of farm life, an invisible tension pulsed through the village, subtle as a heartbeat beneath the earth, a reminder that even ordinary days can conceal extraordinary truths, and the consequences of one man's choice were quietly gathering. Elias often lingered near the old well at the far edge of his property, staring into its dark depths, feeling the pull of something long buried, and asking himself if some secrets were meant to remain hidden forever. One evening, a traveling merchant stopped at the farmhouse, coat damp from rain, and remarked on the fertility of Elias's soil, but his eyes lingered too long on the ridge, as if sensing a tension no words could name. "I've never seen a man work like you, sir," the merchant said, voice low, "but there's something in your eyes, the story the fields won't tell." Elias smiled politely, hiding the unease stirring deep beneath his chest, and guided the merchant to the barn, where shadows clung to the beams like silent witnesses to his every movement. That night, he could not sleep, lantern swinging in one hand, thoughts wandering back to a choice made decades prior, a choice that had cost him more than he would admit, and yet weighed less than a conscience untested. The ridge whispered under the wind, carrying the faint sound of scraping metal, though Elias knew he was alone, or so he told himself, and each creak of timber sounded like a warning from the past. He remembered the letter that had arrived one spring morning, its edges yellowed, its message simple yet damning. Some truths are heavier than soil. Bury them well, or all will suffer. And he had obeyed without question. But obedience came with shadows, and each day, the burden of secrecy grew heavier, pressing on him like a storm cloud pregnant with lightning, ready to shatter the fragile calm of his life. Neighbors began to whisper of missing livestock, strange sounds in the woods at night, and sightings of figures that seemed human yet moved with unnatural purpose. But Elias dismissed their concerns with a polite nod and heavy silence. He feared more than discovery. He feared the judgment of a God who could see the sins hidden beneath the soil, and sometimes, in the quietest hours, he prayed silently, not for forgiveness, but for time to pass without revelation. Children dared one another to run near the ridge at dusk, daring the darkness, yet always returned trembling, whispering of shadows that watched and of eyes that glimmered beneath the trees, stories that only fueled Elias's unease. One morning, the ground had shifted strangely near the far cornfield, soil disturbed though no rain had fallen, and he felt a shiver crawl up his spine, a silent admonition from whatever lay beneath the surface. "I told you not to dig there," he muttered to himself, hands tightening around the handle of his spade. Though he had not moved the earth in decades, yet the memory of his actions remained vivid and haunting. At the tavern, villagers spoke in hushed tones about the Hart farm, about a man whose eyes seemed older than his years, and whose hands bore a strange, almost guilty restlessness even when idle, and Elias felt their curiosity like cold wind. He began to leave food by the forest's edge, as if appeasing unseen eyes, feeling absurd yet compelled, and each evening, the crunch of leaves underfoot reminded him that the earth remembers what men choose to forget. A storm blew in unexpectedly one night, winds tearing at shutters, and he thought he heard voices carried through the gale, faint but urgent, murmuring accusations he could neither ignore nor fully understand, leaving him sleepless until dawn's first gray light. Elias's own reflection in the kitchen window startled him, eyes hollowed by sleepless nights, and he realized that the weight of his secret had begun to shape not just his mind, but his very presence in the world. The village preacher came by, noting the tension in the man's jaw, the wary glance toward the woods, and offered a blessing. But even scripture seemed powerless to pierce the veil of unspoken deeds pressing upon Elias's conscience. At the edge of the field, a crow alighted silently, watching him with beady, knowing eyes, and he shivered, wondering if the world itself had learned of his hidden truth, if nature could see what humans dared not speak aloud. Rain fell heavily one afternoon, turning the fields to mud, and Elias noticed footprints leading away from the ridge, fresh and damp, though no soul had crossed the land, and a chill crawled up his spine. The barn door creaked open at night, slow and deliberate, though wind alone could not explain it, and he found tools out of place, as if someone, or something, was testing the boundaries of his solitude. Neighbors whispered of strange lights in the Hart fields, lanterns swinging in patterns that made no sense, and children claimed to hear soft voices calling their names from beyond the tree-line, though adults dismissed them nervously. Elias began keeping vigil, lantern in one hand, spade in the other, moving methodically through rows of corn, watching shadows stretch unnaturally, and each movement seemed mirrored by unseen figures just beyond the eye's reach. The old well, long ignored, began to feel alive, the air around it heavy and damp, carrying scents of decay and earth, and Elias could swear he heard faint scratching from its depths during the quietest hours. He spoke rarely, and when villagers approached, his words were clipped, careful, as if revealing too much might awaken forces he could not control, leaving him more isolated with each passing day. One evening, his dog, usually loyal and calm, refused to enter the woods, growling low, tail stiff, eyes fixed on a distant shadow, and Elias felt fear, not of the animal, but of what it had seen. The river that cut through Millbrook swelled after spring rains, and Elias noticed debris carried downstream. Twigs, leaves, and fragments of something else, dark and unrecognizable, floating past as though sent to remind him of hidden truths. A stranger arrived in town, cloaked in brown, eyes sharp and assessing, asking questions about Hart's farm with a peculiar insistence, and Elias found himself guarding not only the secret, but the very land that concealed it. He remembered the night long ago when he had buried the chest beneath the old oak, feeling relief that the earth would swallow evidence. Yet now every creaking branch and rustling leaf reminded him that no soil could contain memory forever. That night, a sudden thunderclap shook the ridge, lightning illuminating the far edge of the cornfield, and Elias glimpsed a figure, silent and watchful, vanishing as quickly as it appeared, leaving his heart pounding in the cold, wet darkness. He tried to ignore the signs, tending crops and repairing fences, but each task carried weight, each glance toward the woods a reminder that consequences, though delayed, were patient and persistent, like roots spreading silently underground. Whispers followed him at the tavern, careful yet unmistakable, questions about missing items and strange occurrences, and Elias realized the village itself had become a mirror of his fears, reflecting back suspicions he could not dispel. The animals grew restless, birds leaving the trees in sudden flocks, insects buzzing unusually loud, and even the wind seemed to move with intent, teasing him with a presence he could neither see nor name, but felt pressing close. One night, lanterns swinging in trembling hands, Elias dug near the ridge, soil soft and dark, finding fragments of what he thought buried for good, and with each unearthed piece, his stomach sank further into dread and remorse. A villager came too close, remarking on the oddly tilled soil, and Elias smiled, heart racing, faking casualness, while silently praying the man would never venture too far, for curiosity could unearth what fear alone had buried. At dusk, the forest seemed to lean closer, shadows thickening, sounds amplifying, and Elias felt he was not alone, that whatever had slept for decades beneath the earth had begun to stir, patient, deliberate, and inevitable. He began to dream of whispers and glimpses, visions of the past merging with the present, and awoke with hands clenched, the chill of the ridge lingering in his bones, warning him that every action has consequences, even decades later. Elias realized the moral weight of his choice was not carried solely by himself, but had begun to ripple outward, touching land, life, and conscience alike, and he wondered if any man could truly bury such a burden without it clawing back. The storm returned one night with a vengeance, lightning slashing across the ridge, wind tearing at the farmhouse, and Elias knew the secret beneath the oak could no longer remain hidden, the earth itself demanding reckoning. A sudden cry echoed from the woods, sharp and human, though no one had entered, and his lantern flickered violently, casting moving shadows that seemed almost alive, clawing at his mind with whispered accusation. He ran to the ridge, heart hammering, rain soaking through his coat, and saw the soil tremble as if breathing, an unnatural rising that made the plow feel like a distant memory of his guilt. From the darkness, shapes emerged, vague, shifting, like echoes of his past, silent witnesses to the choice he had made, and he realized the land remembered far more than any man could ever forgive. Elias dropped to his knees, hands digging into the mud, desperately trying to cover the mound, but the earth resisted, the secret it held clawing back, revealing fragments of what he had long hoped would remain unseen. "Why now?" he whispered, voice hoarse. But the wind answered with a scream that carried through the valley, rattling windows and stirring the village in fearful wonder, as if the world itself condemned his silence. A flash of lightning revealed the oak, gnarled and twisted, roots writhing like living things, and beneath it lay remnants of a chest, broken and worn, each piece a testament to his decades of concealment and quiet fear. The crow from earlier alighted on a branch, eyes glinting with unnatural intelligence, and Elias understood, with a shudder, that the judgment he had evaded for years could not be avoided forever, that secrecy exacts its toll. Villagers appeared at the edge of the forest, drawn by noise, rain, and instinct, faces pale, eyes wide, yet they saw only fragments of the chaos, unaware of the moral weight pressing down, sensing only that something terrible had been disturbed. Elias fell back, drenched and trembling, and for the first time in decades, admitted to himself the full cost of his decision, a choice that had begun with necessity and ended in a moral reckoning far greater than he had imagined. The ridge seemed to sigh, a long, wet exhale through shaking trees, and the storm softened slightly, leaving silence thick with consequence, as if nature itself had witnessed the truth and now waited, patient, for the next movement of fate. He raised trembling hands toward the remnants of the chest, whispering apologies no one could hear, and realized that while secrets may lie buried, the world remembers, and memory, whether human or earth, demands acknowledgement before peace can ever exist. Lightning flashed one final time, illuminating the valley in harsh white, and Elias understood that some mistakes are not measured in years, but in the quiet persistence of consequence, echoing through soil, shadow, and conscience alike. Dawn broke slowly over Millbrook, mist curling along the ridge, and the land seemed quieter, as though holding its breath after the night's revelation, the fields damp but serene, and the village hushed in cautious awe. Elias stood beneath the old oak, shoulders bowed, rain-soaked and weary, staring at the fragments of the chest, and understood that some truths, once unearthed, reshaped not only the mind but the very world around them. The villagers, now gathered cautiously at the forest's edge, offered silent acknowledgement rather than questions, sensing the weight of a choice that had lingered decades too long, a secret whose echo was louder than any words. He began repairing fences and mending gates, not for labor's sake, but as a gesture toward reconciliation, a quiet penance to honor both the living and the memories of the past that demanded respect. Elias's hands, calloused and worn, felt lighter for the first time in years, though the burden of conscience remained, a quiet whisper beneath the earth reminding him that morality is not always visible and judgment rarely immediate. The forest seemed to exhale, the wind soft and warm, carrying a sense of calm tempered by lessons hard-earned, and the crow that had watched so long perched silently, its presence a reminder that some observers need no explanation. As he walked back to the farmhouse, the morning sun glinting off wet leaves, Elias felt the valley around him alive, patient, aware, and understood that while secrets may hide, the consequences of human choice are persistent and subtle. And in that valley, people learned that some mistakes don't echo loudly, they whisper for generations.